Hey everyone, my name is Jake and welcome to the channel All Worldly. This is a kind of midweek special edition. You might see Bo's face there. He's hanging out beside us. Yeah, I guess if the Sunday streams are called Sunday service, this is like the midweek streaming. Um, Thank you for joining. Uh, Kind of a last minute stream, but there was a report that was released today from a case study that happened, an inquiry that happened in New Zealand into Jehovah's Witnesses child sexual abuse. And they released their report today. It's something that Watchtower, as they always do, have been dragging their feet on and had tried to prevent parts of the report from coming out. And so I wanted to talk about that. And we're supposed to have a special guest. They haven't arrived yet. So I was kind of trying to wait it out a little bit. And also, frankly, not that many people are here watching yet. And I'm hoping that more people show up. But if not, it'll just be oh shit, what? Can't hear? Why is that? Let me see. It's saying that my audio is being a thing. Can anybody else also not hear? This can all be... Okay. This can all be cut out in post. Alright, cool. As long as some people can hear, fine. Good deal. So to lay a bit of groundwork here, I kind of am hoping to learn more about this live. Okay, our guest's going to be ready in about 15 minutes. Cool. So, no worries. But this is a report in New Zealand, so I felt like we needed a New Zealander on the show, and maybe they can correct me on what the proper terminology is. And how to make myself look less orange in the screen. But that's not super important right now. Let's look at something that came up in the news within the last couple of days, or was it just yesterday? Yes, okay, so yesterday, RNZ, this is a New Zealand news outlet, this headline came up: Jehovah's Witnesses lose last-ditch court case over abuse in care report. Jehovah's Witnesses, the report says, have failed an 11th hour attempt to block part of a lengthy report about abuse in care that is about them. So abuse in care, that is the language that you might have seen in the Australian Royal Commission, and I believe in the ICSA investigation, but it is basically like care settings. Like, Jehovah's Witnesses have a certain level of care and responsibility over children in the group, just as other organizations do, like the Boy Scouts and sports teams and whatever, government programs that deal with kids. And so these investigations are very rarely exclusively about Jehovah's Witnesses. And this inquiry is, it involves more than just Jehovah's Witnesses. So they are, sorry, I'm kind of distracted by Bo. Thankfully, he just left of his own free will. My prayers have been answered. So the thing that is notable about Jehovah's Witnesses, if you've never looked at one of these reports before, is that witnesses are often the only group out of all of the groups that are investigated in these sorts of inquiries and royal commissions. Witnesses are the only group that actively try and deny the responsibility, deny the fact that they have any responsibility over children. And so that is their primary tactic, is to be like, what are you talking about? We don't meet the standards of your investigation because we don't have any programs that isolate children from their parents. We don't have Sunday school. That is, generally speaking, their approach. And so this here, the fact that they tried to get this case thrown out or get parts of it redacted, that's par for the course for them. This is essentially what they always try to do. This last minute attempt kind of belies a certain desperation on their part. So anyway, recommendations from a report into abuse that occurred in state and faith-based care will be made public on Wednesday. So that's today. That happened this morning. On Friday, the Christian Congregation of Jehovah's Witnesses Australasia filed for interim orders in the Court of Appeal to prevent part of the report about them from being published until their Supreme Court appeal is decided. They filed to avoid scrutiny altogether. They asked that part of the final report, a case study on Jehovah's Witnesses, not be published on the Royal Commission's website, that it be kept confidential and not reported on. Wouldn't that be nice? Hey, I would like to request that nobody report on this and that all the facts that you have, just don't publish them. Just keep it a secret, like we do about all our abuse. Justice Cook declined the application in a judgment released on Tuesday, citing considerable public interest in the report and the fact that they had waited till the very last moment. He also said the chances of their success in the Supreme Court must be regarded as low. Justice Cook noted no evidence was filed by the Jehovah's Witnesses in support of the application, and that's another thing that's kind of sad about it, is like they really don't have a defense. Their defense is, we shouldn't have to deal with this. And that has been their only defense. So in this request to not make this stuff public until their inevitable appeal is finished, well, it doesn't really make any sense, because they don't even have any evidence to support withholding the information, because their only argument is, we just think you shouldn't. We just don't think that it applies to us. And who cares about all the abuse victims that you heard from and report on, which we will definitely get to. There was one other thing that I wanted to read on this. Okay. So, a spokesperson for the Australasian branch of Jehovah's Witnesses said in a statement, "We have serious concerns about the accuracy of the report regarding Jehovah's Witnesses and have no choice but to resort to court to address these issues. Child protection is of utmost concern to Jehovah's Witnesses, and we believe the people of New Zealand, its decision makers, and most importantly, survivors, deserve to be presented with accurate information." Oh, survivors of what? The sexual abuse that happened in your organization that you're saying doesn't happen, or does, but you don't bear any responsibility? Like, it's completely incoherent. If they had concerns about the accuracy of the report, they could list what the inaccuracies were, but they can't do that. So that has been what they're up to. They are trying to argue that this is all BS. And I always think it's interesting to see Watchtower spokespeople be quoted, because these are the people in the organization who actually have access to the sort of information that most of us who were in the organization for a long time, like, we didn't have this information, because we were told that any negative reporting about the group was from Satan, that we couldn't trust it. Just if we saw something negative, it was false, because that sort of thing couldn't possibly happen in the organization. And to the extent that it could, there was a no true Scotsman mentality. Like, well, a person who would do such a thing couldn't really be a Jehovah's Witness. But it rarely occurred to me as a witness that the abuse was happening from people in leadership positions. I think I bought this line, or I don't know, the way Watchtower presents it is that the only people who commit crimes like this, although they would say it is a sin, those are like fringe people in the congregation. Those are not good Christians. They're kind of the shady people in the back of the hall that you wouldn't trust anyway. And just because I was in such a bubble, it never crossed my mind that it could be an elder or a ministerial servant, and that's because elders in particular are appointed by Holy Spirit. So if they're an elder, it's because Jehovah wants them to be there. That's why these cases are really devastating to Watchtower, because they reveal the complete lack of Holy Spirit. It exposes the fact that the elders are not divinely appointed. They're just like sort of democratically appointed. There's a boys' club, the elder body. They make recommendations to the circuit overseer, and he says yes or no. And there's no Holy Spirit involved. They review his qualifications, by reading a list of qualities in the scriptures, and then just being like, well, he seems to fit, modest in habits and treats his wife well, and he, gets 6 hours a month in service, so he qualifies, or whatever. So that makes him look really bad. And then they've already dug in their heels so much when it comes to covering up this abuse that it really makes them look bad. They really don't want the membership to see how hard they fight to keep these things covered up. Like, if you're a witness peeking in right now, that's the thing that should really bother you. I mean, the fact that this abuse is happening at all in your spiritual paradise should bother you. But the fact that your leadership is intentionally telling you not to check, not to see what they're saying, that's, that should be unacceptable to you. So, on that lovely note, let's get to the actual report that was released today. And by the way, Ron Pomo in chat, what a good pal. Good evening to everyone. Way to go, New Zealand. And yes, way to go, New Zealand. I should have started on a much more positive note, but I had some pre-show jitters, I have to admit. Also, okay. I was about to shout out one of my wife's comments, but it was funny, but not necessarily on tone. I want to shout out this comment from Sparky. When I left, I wrote a letter with data erasure request because I knew the elders had explicit shepherding visit notes on my abuse. It was denied. Apparently, they had a religious right to keep it. That's crazy. If you have that, could you send me like a picture of, like, could you email it to me? I'll put the link in my email in the description, but it's in most of my previous videos as well, because that's pretty crazy. And I don't know if that's a violation of any kind of laws or not, but it'd be worth investigating. But speaking of worth investigating, all the other terrible things Jehovah's Witness leadership are up to. For any witnesses who are watching, or just people who don't know anything about the channel or whatever, I would try to reserve my criticisms for the leadership and, aim the criticisms at the policies and procedures that allow for the coercive environment to take place. Rank and file Jehovah's Witnesses like myself, we're kept in an information silo where we don't really know what's happening in the outside world, and we're raised in a really closed-off religious environment, and we're going to see a lot of quotes to that effect. So, but the way Watchtower paints these scandals to their membership is that it's all based on innuendo and hearsay and quotes that have been taken out of context and fundamental misunderstandings of the procedures of Jehovah's Witnesses. A recent change they made in the Watchtower is, in the latest Watchtower, they changed the phrase judicial committees. That was the name of this policy that they have. They just call it a committee of elders. We can get into why they do that later, but like, if you're just a Jehovah's Witness reading that, you're not going to know that there is a legal reason why they're doing it, that they are doing this because judicial committees as a concept have gotten them in trouble in court. It's 3 elders, or 2? A judicial committee is 3. It's 3 elders sitting down with a sinner and asking them incredibly personal, probing questions about whatever the sin is. And although Watchtower vehemently deny this, oftentimes abuse victims, because it is a crime that is sexual in nature, Watchtower views the fact that sex was involved, like, they victim blame. So they will make and have historically made victims of sexual trauma relive their abuse because the judicial committee is hammering them and asking them for all these details, asking them to recount events. So witnesses, meanwhile, are completely unaware, for the most part, that this is happening. And oftentimes, 100% of the time, it's a Jehovah's Witness, it's an ex-witness that is bringing up these accusations, that is coming forward to the press or to these various inquiries, going to journalists, or just sharing their experience on TikTok or whatever. They are people who were Jehovah's Witnesses, and a lot of times are shunned because they have chosen to speak out against the religion, or because they simply couldn't emotionally deal with being a witness anymore after what happened to them. But there's no way to leave the organization with dignity, so they are still treated like a sinner. They are still treated like their abuser. It's really disgusting how it all works out. Do you mind if I read this comment, Christina? Okay. This is from Christina, my wife. When having this kind of conversation about CSA with my mom, it was a horribly devastating experience. She acknowledges that predators exist in and out of the org, but feels indifferent. I asked, why would Jehovah allow these people in if he's chosen this group of people as his? And of course, she replied with some milk to JW response. Yeah, that's the kind of fascinating thing, is that Jehovah's Witnesses can endlessly rationalize abuse that takes place in their own religion because the world just doesn't understand all the great parts about it. But of course, when this kind of abuse happens in the Catholic Church or in LDS or any other religion, they have historically been the first to point at that and say, oh my God, can you imagine being one of those Catholics with their pedophile priest, not understanding that the exact same thing is happening to them? Yes, actually, I would recommend that everyone go to I'm going to try to say that again. www.jwchildabuse.org. That is Mark O'Donnell's website, who I've interviewed on the channel before about CSA. He has done so much reporting on this. He's been an expert witness in trials. You might have seen him in documentaries and stuff about witnesses. He's an incredible activist, and he's got so many incredible court documents that I've been using for a video that I'm working on that's broadly about all the lies Watchtower tells about CSA. And so we'll get into that. They hit all the greatest hits in this inquiry. So let's get into the report. I know I said that 10 minutes ago, but this time it's true.
Don't forget about Nikki.
I haven't.
Oh.
Yeah, she'll be on. So our special guest will be arriving shortly. I think. I don't actually have any control over that. So this is the executive summary, and oh boy, now this is where it would be nice to have a native New Zealander, because I don't know how to pronounce this. I'm gonna say A-Town. Jehovah's Witnesses have been active in A-Town, New Zealand for over 100 years, with the movement growing significantly just prior to the inquiry period. The Christian faith takes a literal interpretation of the Bible and relies on first-century principles to set practice, policy, and procedure. What I think is impressive about this, I'm not going to go through all of this, because if you're an ex-Jehovah's Witness, you know all this already, but reading the report is worth it, because I think it demonstrates a really solid understanding of, oh no, I'm being told the link isn't working. Well, let me try this. Yeah, like they have a good understanding of how Jehovah's Witnesses work, and that's something that, as an ex-Jehovah's Witness, I know that now, but as a witness, my perception would have been that the world, these court cases, they just don't get it. Like, they don't really understand Jehovah's Witnesses, but they do. Like, they really, in good faith and in a dispassionate way, break down how the organization works, the structure of it, and everything. Now, this is where we should get into why they were included in this inquiry, and where, so much of this controversy stems, is like, what the investigation, what this Royal Commission considered to be care, like an organization that was responsible for care of some kind. And here to help me explain what that is another incredible ex-JW activist, Apostate Barbie.
Hi.
Hello, thank you for being here.
Sorry I'm late.
No problem. No problem. I just started talking about this report. I read a little bit about the delay that they tried to cause with this trial. Like they tried to stop some of it from coming out. But I just jumped into this, and actually, I had a question for you, Mickey. Well, I have several questions. But first is, how do you pronounce this? What kind of New Zealand place is this?
Aotearoa.
Aotearoa.
Yeah. So that's the Māori
Aotearoa.
name for New Zealand.
Okay. Say that last one again.
It's the Māori name for New Zealand. So the name.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. I'm going to have a few grammatical and language questions throughout this. There were a couple terms that were like, is that a New Zealand thing? Now, are you still there? Like, do you, were you kind of aware of this at all? I feel like this one wasn't on my radar as much for some reason.
So I'm in the UK now, but I have been
Right.
trying to keep up with this, like as things developed, and I saw that they were trying to get out of being part of the abuse and care inquiry, but I think 4 times they were unsuccessful. This is the 4th time, and they were trying to get access to this report before it became public as well. So
Right. Yes. That's a good point. And I forgot to mention that. Like, they also wanted to just see the report before anybody else, presumably so they could start spinning it in the media.
yeah,
They're so good at that.
yeah,
You know, something that I think goes underrated as far as why Watchtower doesn't want witnesses to just see any of this at all is because they're really bad at defending themselves. Like, it's kind of embarrassing, I think.
yeah. I think they mentioned somewhere. I don't know if you've covered it already. Was that like the inquiry was really concerned with the fact that Jehovah's Witnesses keep denying that they have children in their care.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mentioned that kind of in the abstract that they wanted, or sorry, that they just kind of try and fight them on the notion that they're like, no, we don't take any care of children. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
It's kind of an incoherent argument, and I didn't even have any concept as a Jehovah's Witness that would have been an argument that Watchtower would use. Like, that wouldn't have even come to my mind because it's obviously that, like, we do.
Yeah. Yeah. They're like, we don't have any policies in place, and therefore you can't include us. But it's like,
Yeah.
but no, like you do all of these things with children.
Yes.
So.
Yes. Absolutely. And so to that point, this is the thing I was about to read. It was just this third bullet point here. Children and young people were in the care of Jehovah's Witnesses during faith activities, including door-to-door preaching or witnessing, pastoral support, working bees, and other organized activities. Let's put a pin in that. And investigation and judicial committee processes. The faith contested whether these situations fell within the inquiry's terms of reference, but the inquiry is satisfied that children and young people were in the care of the faith in these situations for the reasons set out below. And they explain basically the very obvious truth of this. But, okay, first of all, what is this working bees thing?
Oh.
I've never heard this before.
When we
And I
go
did,
through,
and I
very
Googled it, but I feel like it made me more confused.
Sorry.
Oh, no, sorry.
So no, it's just like if we were going to go do like Kingdom Hall maintenance, like on the outside, as well as like cleaning on the inside. But it was mostly if you're doing, it was like a day thing, like a quick zhuzh up of the Kingdom Hall of the working bee.
Oh, okay. So is that just kind of like common parlance then? Like that's just like a phrase people use?
I think so, yeah, because sometimes they would also organize it for like if there was an elderly sister, you'd go have like a working bee at her home to sort of help with mowing the lawns and like any like things inside her house that need to be fixed, like if a window's broken or something, and like just get like a group of whoever
volunteer,
can go
like group volunteer activities kind of thing.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. I I now understand completely the truth of New Zealand. Okay, so I think when it's all laid out like this, like door to door preaching, obviously, yes, witnesses, or sorry, children often are separated from their parents. That's just true. But I thought this was really interesting. Um, I don't know. This is all kind of it's all kind of devastating. I started to just be reading texts boringly, but I think reading text is interesting. Several factors within the faith increase the risk of abuse occurring during the inquiry period, including the status of elders and the power and influence they exercise, particularly over children and young people. The faith have high barriers to the disclosure of abuse, making it more difficult for individuals to disclose any abuse either to others within the faith or to secular authorities. These barriers included the inferior position of women within the faith, rigid disclosure process, the fear of being shunned, and the relative disconnection from non Jehovah's Witnesses, all of which likely prevented or delayed victims from disclosing abuse. There was also inadequate vetting of elders and insufficient training in preventing or responding to abuse. So that's like in a single paragraph, they completely eviscerate Watchtower's argument. It's
Yeah.
gone. Um, as far as I find all this so like insightful, and they make this clear in a way that I think if I was a Jehovah's Witness, I would have a hard time refuting this. I don't think that you think that you would have trouble reporting abuse if it happened to you, like if you're a witness, but it is like the structure kind of works against you. Um,
Mm.
can you speak on like what they're talking about, like in a broad sense, just from your Jehovah's Witness experience? Like, what are the social pressures that they're talking about?
I think definitely like even just the way that it's so patriarchal, like that it's so male led, that I wouldn't feel comfortable, and I didn't feel comfortable if I had to bring up something that had happened to me. Like, as much as like I wasn't a child, I was a victim of the two witness rule, and I had to go before elders about that. And it was just so uncomfortable. Whereas if there was perhaps a woman available in leadership, it might not have been so uncomfortable, but also probably those
Yeah.
rules wouldn't have been there in the first place. Like, it would have been,
Right. Yeah.
yeah,
It would like one of the things that I have found that like I didn't know before I started looking into like the service department more, but I've been trying to like read past cases where like Gary Bro and Alan Schuster and these guys from the US service department are called in, and they have been in the service department for like 40 years. Like they've been there for decades. So like the these changes to the rules like all throughout like from the 70s onwards, it's like been the same guys in that department.
yeah,
There's not even been, it's not like there's like a firing like when somebody messes up at their job, like, hey, your crappy policies got us in court, you're out of here. Like, no, they just are like, all right, what words can we change? And
yeah,
that kind of tells me like they really want these policies in place. Like there's no interest in changing them.
yep, yeah, definitely. Um, and I think I like the way that they have laid out that paragraph there. Like you say, it's really hard for even an active Jehovah's Witness to turn around and be like, oh, well, because it's just so clear and so truthful to how it is being a witness.
Yeah. Yeah, this
Yeah.
is Christina here said, um, I always thought it was normal, like for kids to be separated from their parents in the ministry, but this is truly not normal outside of Oregon. Like, it's true.
Yeah.
We're going to see some phony baloney testimony later. I didn't mean to rhyme that much, to be honest. Thanks. Christina says she's proud of me. So that's all that really matters. I
I think
thought,
she's right as well with that comment, because it's something I never thought about until afterwards. Like, I remember going to specifically organized children's fun day, like kind of thing,
oh,
where
yeah,
I'd be matched up with a child and go field service. Like, what the
yes.
heck? It's
Right.
kind
No,
of
that's
weird.
absolutely true. And like this is this is your spiritual family. This is your only community, and you don't like take off your Jehovah's Witness hat when you get
Mm.
home. Like you're always a JW.
And
So
it's like
there
trying
is
to
a
train them to be like, you kind of try to be like, oh yeah, field service is fun. You're gonna love doing this for the rest of your
yes.
life. Like,
You're gonna get to work with like with older ones, and they're so
yeah,
wise and never creepy.
no.
Like
Old men
and
never hit on children.
yeah, especially old men. Like, but that's like even in the Caleb Sophia videos, you see how that's normalized. Like how one of Sophia's like best friends is just like an old lady in the
Yeah,
congregation. And like that's a certain sweetness to that, but it's also you can see how that kind of when combined with a power imbalance, like what they're describing,
exactly.
yeah, it just
Exactly.
creates this caustic environment. And they also bring up something that I really started thinking about um, more recently, which is like they don't train the elders at all. Like when you look at what other churches do, they actually put their, you know, pastors or priests or whatever through at least some kind of training. Now, I don't necessarily trust it, but that does seem better than literally
Nothing.
nothing.
Yeah. Yep.
And like, no, like 45 minutes on KM school once every 3 years isn't the same thing.
And even like with the barriers that they talked about, just like you don't even realize when you're a witness that the fact that like if you open up to someone about this, then they become blood guilty potentially, and then they'll go to the elders and they pressure you into going. If you don't go, it's like it's you can't just open up to someone and get it off your chest, even if you didn't want to pursue it further. They might suddenly be like, oh well, actually, like you 15-year old
Yes.
have actually committed a sin here by hanging out with this gross old man who took advantage of you. And like,
Yeah. And like, what if the abuser is an elder? What if it's a member of your family that you have to live with, or
mm,
you know, just like somebody who's beloved in the congregation? I really
exactly.
like. I'm so glad that you said that about like you don't just have confidants like they always direct people to be like if you're struggling with something confide in a mature Christian, and it's
Mm,
like well you can't do that because the whole religion is kind of built on snitching and policing each other.
exactly. Exactly. I really like.
Everybody's a cop.
I just had time to read this afternoon after work, and I was just like, I really like the way that they just laid everything out. And even though the case numbers were low in this instance, they recognized it was because of those barriers that not so many people would be able to come forward. And it's still
Yes.
valid. Like, it doesn't matter if it's 1 or 10 or 10,000, it's still a valid
Yeah.
problem. And they also recognized that it was worldwide and referenced the Australian Royal Commission and the ICSA one as well.
Yeah, like right here it even says like the lack of detail in records retained by the faith inhibited the inquiry's ability to assess the extent of abuse in the care of the faith because of the lack of detail about the nature of the relationships between elders and abused children and young people. Like they hammer them for their bad record keeping, which we know is like intentional now.
Mm,
Like they're very consciously destroying documents when they think they can get away with it, and telling elders, you know, to be more I don't know how you put like be more cautious about what they write down in their
yeah.
personal notes. So I think that's really true. One of the things about it is like it's not as sweeping as the Australian Royal Commission, but Watchtower also filibustered more than they did
Yeah.
in the ARC. So
And also,
oh,
just I don't know if you touched on it before, but at the beginning of this report and at the beginning they have like a prayer, um,
mm,
and at the end they have like a song, both originally in Māori and translated to English.
I
But
was
it just
wondering about
really,
that. I'm glad you brought this up.
it
I'll
really
scroll up to
highlights
it.
like the love that went into this. Like, it's not just like an official cold government kind of thing. Like, there is some love and some
Yes.
care behind it. And I like when I saw that, I was like, no, that's actually really nice.
I
And
know.
especially
Like
as
this
well,
is kind of a it's just like affirmation. This is like kind of poetic thing about like the intent behind this document,
mm,
and it's way more pretty than the sorts of legal documents we get in the United
and
States.
they sort of
Um,
highlight as well that I think 30% of the members or Jehovah's Witnesses in New Zealand are Maori or Pacific Island, so it's not like a small number. That's quite a
wow.
lot.
Yeah, no, that is a
Yeah.
lot. Um, I do want to shout out having an older person as a best friend when you're a kid is emotionally stunting. You should have a best friend your own age. That's
Yeah.
another thing that can be. I'm glad that Chris brought out this point. I always find myself saying that weird Watchtower language. She brought out a very encouraging point in her comment, which is like everybody's experience in the organization is kind of based on what the congregation is like that they're in and whatever the culture of that congregation is, and they're not all the same. And so if you're somebody who's just happens to be in the wrong geographical area, like if you don't have the right zip code, you can be in a congregation where you're the only kid and you have to befriend adults, and the organization yeah, encourages you to do that. So absolutely
And on the flip
ridiculous. So
side, how sad if you're like a elderly person or older person, not elderly, sorry, and your only best friend is some 10-year-old kid. Like, what?
that's a
Like, what's
good
going on
point.
there?
Good point. It's also a little sad if you're a grown adult and your best friend is an 8-year-old. It's a little weird. Um, so this, I do want to read this, and then we can kind of skip forward a little bit. But they say, despite the high barriers to disclosure and the faith's inadequate approach to record keeping, the inquiry heard from one person who was sexually abused in the care of the faith during the inquiry period, with others experiencing psychological and emotional abuse during investigations and judicial committee processes. I was just surprised, honestly, that they even talked about psychological and emotional
Mm.
abuse as being, equally unacceptable within care settings. Um, I think that that's really important. And they conclude that the Jehovah's Witnesses took inadequate steps to prevent and respond to abuse in care during the inquiry period. The policies, rules, and standards relevant to child sexual abuse more broadly were primarily based on passages from the Bible and located across many different Jehovah's Witness publications. Processes for handling and responding to disclosures of abuse of any kind were outdated and ineffective, such as the requirement for 2 witnesses to child abuse. There was a lack of reporting to external authorities and inadequate consequences for abusers within the faith. In fact, I'm pretty sure that they say later on that they didn't have any evidence that they had reported anything to the police.
Yes, they do say that later on.
Um, yes. So this is important, this 2 witness rule thing. If you're not familiar with this, I'm sure you are. Do you want to describe this? Because I feel like I'm over talking.
Okay. So the 2 witness rule is basically something didn't happen unless 2 people saw it happen outside of the person that did the thing and the person that the thing was done to. So basically, 4
Yes.
people need to be there in that room.
Yeah, yeah, and it just doesn't make any sense. And one of the things that's amazing about the Australian Royal Commission is the way, is his name Angus Stewart, whatever the, person who's questioning Jeffrey Jackson is like, he pulls out the Bible and is like, okay, but this scripture here says that there's no witnesses to this sexual abuse. Like, is it possible that you could apply the scripture instead? Like, he's trying to work with the
Yeah.
governing body, like, you need to change your policy. You could use this script. Like, what if you just said this? Because I think they, like the institutions doing this, are like, we don't want you. Like, we're not trying to change your theology. We just want you
Yeah.
to update your standards and practices and policies. But witnesses' posture is this isn't some policy. We are doing literally exactly what the Bible says.
Yeah.
So you can't tell us no.
But that's also like
Doesn't
that
make any
they're
sense.
trying to trick themselves in their own minds because they need an excuse Otherwise, half the witnesses at the top wouldn't be there anymore.
Yeah, I think that people like Bethel is an especially like hermetically sealed environment. Like it's even more closed off than your normal
Mm.
Jehovah's Witnesses. And I have to think that if you are living and eating and sleeping with Jehovah's Witnesses like 24/7, and all your coworkers, like, and just all of your conversations all day revolve around this stuff, you're going to start believing these things no matter how ridiculous it is, because your entire livelihood, such as it is tied up in remaining in this
Yeah.
building or this complex. So like you kind of have to believe it.
And I
Yeah.
think, like, I mean, I do mean, also, like, that there are potentially men at the top who have engaged in this kind of like child abuse that they
Yeah.
don't want to have to be held accountable for. So it's like
Exactly.
they're gonna
And
find any which way and find it from the Bible or whatever and be like, well, see, we can't. So
yeah, like they are trying so hard to prevent information coming out that you have to think that it's worse than the stuff that they do
yeah,
let out, because why else would it be the case? And the thing that's really terrifying to me about the men at the top of the organization is like there are simply no checks and balances on them at all. Like there's
no,
just like, short of somebody going to the press or posting on social media and intentionally like blowing up their life to be like, hey, governing body so and so or some higher up at Bethel did something. Like there's no structure
yeah,
in the organization to deal with that.
yeah,
Everything is going to be designed to protect the abuser.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
because it's usually the abuser who has a position of privilege and power.
yes, and Christina just said it's usually the abuser that has the position of power to begin with.
Yeah,
So, yeah, it's like you're completely screwed. So that's a bit of a tangent, but I'm glad you brought that up because I think it's super true. And I've been thinking about it a lot, reading higher ups actually testify in court, because it's like it's so slimy
yeah,
that it's just like, what are you hiding? Um, and before I move on to this next section, this just kind of reiterates that Jehovah's Witnesses' approach to this inquiry and to its activities were premised on the basis that no children or young people were ever in its care. The
ever.
ongoing failure of the faith to recognize that children and young people were in its care gives the inquiry concern about the faith's overall approach to the safety of
Yes.
children and young people in its care during the inquiry period. So I think this is a really devastating line for them, and I have to think that if they were trying to remove stuff from the report, that it would be stuff like this, because it's so just disgusting to see that this is their argument, that no, we are not responsible for what happens to
Mm.
kids in this organization.
We never had children in our care.
Yeah.
Ever.
Like on one hand, an
Wow.
entire section of the website dedicated to children. On the other hand, what kids? What are you talking about? Those kids just kind of wander in here. We don't know how they get to the meetings or what they do once they leave. It's absurd.
We don't do Sunday school and therefore we're exempt.
Right. That's like the only thing. It's like, we don't do Sunday school, and they're like, cool. That's not what the inquiry is about.
Yeah.
It's whether or not you are in any way responsible. And yeah, they just are like, no, we're not. Not our fault. Didn't do it. So they actually, I thought it was kind of interesting they get into like the history of like how the organization started in general.
Yes.
So just to, I actually didn't read these numbers, but the witnesses told the inquiry, which I like, that they don't actually have confirmation. They're like, well, this is just what they told us. The Jehovah's Witnesses told the inquiry that in 2023 there were around 1,576 elders in, what is it? Ayatorra?
Aotearoa. It's kind of
Okay,
like,
so I was
if
way
you know
wrong.
Spanish, it's kind of similar in pronunciation. You pronounce the
Okay,
vowels in the same way.
Ayatorra. Oh, that's tough. That's like so many vowels. That's like one of those long Scrabble words that you wouldn't get a lot of points for. Um, so the shepherding thing, and I think that this is smart. They might have done this in previous cases, but maybe I just hadn't thought about it much before that. Like the entire shepherding environment in the nature of shepherding calls is also a time when, like, outside of a church setting, Jehovah's Witness leadership is dealing with
Yeah.
minors. I just legit never thought about that, but you can totally see how that could be a thing, or how an encouraging one-on-one visit with so and so, like, that's going to be viewed as spiritual by the victim.
Yeah, and that happened like not in any kind of abusive way, but like because my mum was a single mum in the truth kind of thing. My brother would often have elders or ministerial servants take him out and like encourage him, like because he needed a father. So it was like that definitely happened.
Yes. Oh my God. They absolutely. Okay, so they made this claim in Australia, says the governor. So this is where we start getting into actual testimony. Former Jehovah's Witness Jasmine Grew described a patriarchal hierarchy in the Jehovah's Witness leadership. She said that in the community, male members strive to become elders, which means respect and authority. Once a member becomes an elder, Ms. Grew said, they rule the place. Everything goes through them. One Jehovah's Witness stated that her mother trusted all elders implicitly. I think that that's just true.
Yeah.
I think if you're a witness saying that's not true, you're lying. I don't think you're ever taught to have a healthy skepticism towards the elders, and like in some way, like, well, keep your distance. No.
There'd be like ones that you're like, oh, I don't really like that guy's vibe, but like they were still an elder that you had to listen to and trust.
And even then, you're like, the magazines are like, we have to appreciate the men who Jehovah has taking the lead among us. So if there's an elder you don't like, just try and figure out why you do like him. Actually.
Yeah. If you don't like him, it's your fault.
Yeah. I like his creepy hugs, actually. That's true. Like, we had a creepy hug elders.
Yep.
Yes. We had an elder that, like, would kind of rub against your face when he hugged you. Like, really, like, nuzzle in. Creepy. Very creepy. And they quote this 2010 version of the Handbook Shepherd the Flock of God. And often in these cases, if you've never seen these before, like, they'll go back to what the rules were at the time, because witnesses do change their procedures a lot, and they're going to argue, like, whoa, this is our procedure. Well, what was the procedure in whatever decade the abuse happened in? And they'll pull the procedures from that time. And so this says Jehovah has appointed Jesus Christ as head of the Christian congregation. Revelation 1:20 depicts Jesus as holding the anointed elders in his right hand, thus by extension indicating that he controls all bodies of elders for the purpose of accomplishing Jehovah's will. That's crazy. I've never read that before.
All the bodies.
Yes. Jesus controls all the bodies. But that's like, and what's interesting about this quote is that this is from Shepherd the Flock of God, which means, like, yeah, as a witness, you're hearing stuff like this, but that's actually aimed at elders. So it is aimed at boosting their ego and what they're doing and, like, convincing themselves that, like, you were appointed by Jesus.
Yeah, that's actually kind of funny. I didn't think about that, because when I was reading it, I was like, well, I definitely didn't hear that. And then I was like, well, obviously I didn't, because I am but a woman and therefore cannot thumb the pages of such a piece of literature.
Nay, nary a page of the Shepherd book now.
So, yeah,
absolutely.
Now that you've put it that way, I'm like, that's so, like, oh, good on you for being an elder.
Yes.
Like, it's
I don't remember if it was Ben who told me this, or if it was another former Bethelite who said that they worked in the printery and they would occasionally have to, like, print the Shepherd books, and, like, sisters weren't allowed to deal with the boxes with the elder's manual in it. They couldn't even just take the box, like, because, no, you might accidentally see secret man Bethel. Secrets.
I'd be fired from Bethel in, like, an hour, because I would have immediately gone,
yeah. If I had ever seen that book, like, sitting out on, like, the couch, like my dad left it out there on accident, no shot I wouldn't have taken a peek.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But Christina just said they would never leave it out on accident, and honestly, that's probably true. Like, they're
Yes,
told that this is like handling the nuclear codes. You have
I
to
would
keep
have
this
been like
safe.
afraid to look in the book itself, but I definitely would have been like, "Are you saying I can't touch this box?" Like, touch, touch, touch.
Oh, the box. Okay, no, you're right. The book is kind of a different story, but also I'm like, I feel like I might have just taken a little peek inside, because what my dad would say is that, oh, it's all just stuff from the Watchtower. I'm like, I mean, kind of, but no,
Because
it's
I
definitely
remember, like,
not.
I would sit there because I was working for witnesses at one point in my life, and there would be the elders' school, and so the guy that ran the business would go off for a week, and so would two or three of the other guys in the office. And I'm like, how come? Like, why is all this information separate? Like, why do I have to be a pioneer to read all of this stuff if like that you're getting at pioneer school? And like, how come aren't we all the same? Like, how come?
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm glad you said that, because I was thinking about that watching like the Gilead graduation. Like, the tone of those are so different, because they're kind of like pep rallies, like, you did it, you're so spiritual, you're the best of the bunch, you got so much amazing education that no one else has. And like that video that Warwick Pimo, the real Warwick Pimo, by the way, shout out, read about that on avoidjw.org. It's really interesting. He leaked this video that me and Christina reacted to, that was an actual, like, it was a Gilead talk that Tony Morris was giving, and the demeanor that he has of just kind of like laid back chatting with the
Yeah.
homies, kind of like holding court and bragging about stuff and hyping them up as like, nah, obviously you're the most spiritual people on the planet, we all know that. Like, it's so crazy.
Yeah.
It's like Scientology in that way. Like, there is more, like, you get access to exclusive information the higher up you move in the
Yeah.
organization. Like,
There's
elders don't have the
definitely
branch
different
manual.
levels.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, ridiculous. So wait, so this is the 2022 one. And I like this. Similarly, Watchtower, February 22, refers to the governing body as the faithful and discreet slave, giving direction to the elders, and says that congregants show they trust Jehovah, God, by following the elders' directions. And that's, I think it's really important that they lay out, like, this is the environment that witnesses are in. And so, I don't know, good job, New Zealand. I think they did a really good job with this
Yeah.
report. They mention, like, witnesses, it's a way of life for members, and they're expected to adhere to all religious doctrines that the governing body establishes through its interpretation of the Bible. All that good stuff. Let's see. Okay, and they also get into the end of the world stuff, like, under their key beliefs.
Yeah.
They say a belief that the end of the world is imminent, male headship, or the belief in a strict patriarchal authority structure involving obedience and submission in both the organization and the family, maintaining a separateness from and exercising caution in associating with those who are not members of the organization. Like, they are actively encouraging all of the things that make it an environment rife for abuse.
Yeah.
Can you believe that we were in this religion, just like chilling at the convention?
No. Yes. No.
Just like nodding. I saw a few posts from witnesses who apparently I still follow on Instagram, and they haven't blocked me, and I saw their convention post for the year, and I kind of just had this sadness, like, I can't imagine still doing that. That seems like a bummer.
Yeah.
This is also pretty devastating. The Jehovah's Witness faith is not merely an association based on friendship, common interest, work, or a home. Being part of the faith is considered a pathway to salvation and to escape the perils of an imminent Armageddon, a conflict that signals the end of Earth's history. Jehovah's Witnesses consider themselves a unified spiritual family. They see and refer to each other as spiritual brothers and sisters. So, and this matter of members being required to confess to the elders, to report to the elders. These sins are investigated by what the faith describes as an ecclesiastical judicial committee to determine whether a person should be disfellowshipped. a sanction imposed by the elders, many Jehovah's Witnesses are expelled from the faith by disfellowship. So yeah, a lot here. We didn't even get into this, but yeah, the possibility is that you're shunned. You know,
Yeah.
if you just, even by telling a friend.
Yeah. And I think also it's like interesting with what's happened with Norway and then their whole like we don't do judicial committees anymore. Like they're gonna turn
Yes.
around and use that now with this. Like if they have to do
Yes.
something publicly, they're gonna say, "Oh, we don't do that. What are you talking about?"
Oh yeah, and we don't even use that word. Where did you get that from? Like the thing that I hope future courts and inquiries into the group realize is that they didn't change the policy at all. They just changed what it's called.
Yeah.
To be like, look, judicial. We got rid of that word. Now it's just a committee of elders. Who knows what they're committing about? That's
We're
not
not what they're
correct English.
judging.
Yeah, it's or like we don't disfellowship people. We just remove them and treat them exactly the same as we did before.
I see Jehovah lovingly guided us to make sure that we have these like little meetings with like the minors' parents involved now. So you know, we changed it already.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
They get into the consequences of disfellowshipping, which I've definitely talked about ad nauseum. And this little section on becoming a Jehovah's Witness is really good. They quote Jasmine Grew again, and she says, "When I was 2 years old, my mother and father were cannabis-smoking hippies when Jehovah's Witnesses knocked on their door. My father was only 22 and a very vulnerable solo mum." I should have had you read this. It seemed
Mom.
inevitable that... You
Sorry.
can read it, by the way. I
No,
honestly
it's okay.
felt weird about asking you because it felt like I was like, "Sister, can you read the paragraph, please?" It felt like, can I still ask people to read paragraphs and it not be JWE? But you can read it if you want.
No, it's okay. You're doing a good job. I'm not wearing my glasses, so I'm trying to follow.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, wait there.
No, understood. I have
I
absolutely done
definitely
that.
can't see what's on there.
No, okay. It seemed inevitable that she would split up with my father anyway. She was not working. Both my parents were susceptible to a convincing approach by a religious faith. The Jehovah's Witnesses prey on people who are most vulnerable. They give false hope. They provide the vulnerable with a community and a family and a sense of belonging. They work their way into your life, so the relationship becomes very tight. So much good stuff in here. They also instill in you fear of the outside world. So, in anticipating becoming a solo parent, my mother knew she had children to protect. My father decided against becoming too involved in the religion, and my mom said, "Well, I'm going," and they split up over it. Our congregation was on the street
Yeah.
from then on. My father took a different direction, and I did not see him again until I was 14 years old. This is like a really, really good breakdown that I don't think I've really seen in one of these reports of like someone being like, this is how they wrote people into the group.
Yeah.
That's pretty impressive because it like so often it is born in people, so it's their entire life. Like that's my experience, and
Yeah.
it's always interesting hearing the perspective of people who like are able to articulate this is why they joined. It's because they were vulnerable.
Yeah, I think I was kind of similar. Like my mom joined when I was 5, and she was also in a vulnerable position as well. Very similar to Jasmine's experience here as well. But I really like how she really highlighted that it gives you a community. Like there's just automatically a community, and that's something that I've thought about a lot since moving to the UK because I've been thinking like if I was a witness, I would immediately have so many things going on, so many people around me that it's a little bit harder now because I've had that in the past, and so I'm like, ugh, but I'm also like, I knew not to expect that, so it's completely fine. And obviously, I've got an amazing family with Riley and Marsha.
Yeah,
They're
but it is like it is an adjustment. We've like had that same thing where it's like well, like when we moved, and we were just used to like, well, we just had the congregation help us before, and we don't have that now. Like that was nice. It was nice to
Yeah.
have like your church. It was nice to have built-in
And it was nice as
community.
well, like for the perspective of helping other people as well. Like
Yes.
I loved helping my friends or going and getting involved with different things, like working being,
Yeah.
for example.
Yes. Yes. No. Like I really took joy in like shoveling kind of the older friends' driveways and stuff, or helping them out like with stuff
Yeah,
in their
like
house. Like that was well, I didn't like it, but I liked to make myself feel good by telling myself I was a good person by doing that.
yeah,
And so now I just do this, and it's kind of the same thing. But they
yeah.
that but it is nice. Like it is nice if you are somebody that doesn't have a lot of help. Like this is a
How they get you.
quick. It's a get friends quick scheme.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, like the way that she said that they insert themselves into your life. Like they're going to really try and love bomb you and
And they
demonstrate.
hold on tight. And I think as well, like the time period that they're looking into is the 80s and 90s and early 2000s, I think, by my recollection.
Oh,
But
okay.
it was like the 90s when I joined, well, when my mum joined, and it was like the 3 nights a week. So it wasn't like
Oh yeah.
you're not just going once a week. Like, that well aware is what I do as well. But yeah, there were 3 nights of meetings. One night was supposed to be family study. Saturdays were field service. Like there was possibly one day that you would have
Yeah,
for yourself. Like
that's true.
they
Like
really do
because
have a
I grew up
tight
in that
grip on you.
same. Yeah, I grew up in the same environment and like in that same era. So it was like you, yeah, you only had one free day to yourself basically, because even one of the other days was supposed to be family worship or family study, and even now, like there are fewer meetings a week, but they're still going to insert yourself themselves in your life by like, well, why are you watching some pagan Satan show when you could be watching JW.org? Why are you listening to rap music when you could listen to our weird JW music?
Yeah, why are
Um,
you drawing pictures of like whatever you want to draw? You should be drawing pictures of like kingdom scenes.
oh, that that one, I heard that one a lot. That hurt me. Um, so this is where they acknowledge, what Watchtower's argument is. Like, unlike most other faith-based organizations, the inquiry investigated that Jehovah's Witnesses did not provide faith-based schools, children's homes, or foster care services during the inquiry period. However, the faith did provide pastoral care and other informal forms of care. Pastoral care included spiritual, social, emotional, and material support or guidance for individuals or communities. It can also include visiting, counseling, religious counseling, including Bible studies or other faith activities, or otherwise helping people in the congregation. Yeah, this is kind of what we were just talking about. The faith also assumed the responsibility for the care of children and young people in other situations, such as witnessing, door-to-door preaching. So, yeah, I think they nailed it.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm trying to make sure I'm not like lingering on the boring parts. Should I skip ahead to something, do you think?
I don't know. I took screenshots earlier, but I'm also not very smart, and I left those on my phone, which I'm currently looking into in the camera.
No, that I'm kind of in the same situation. I was like, wait, I took notes in a totally unhelpful place, and now I don't have
And I
access to.
also like completely got the time difference wrong, so I was late.
Oh, well, that's no. I should have been more clear about that. No worries at all. Now, this is probably important context. In this case study, the inquiry focuses on situations where the Jehovah's Witnesses assumed responsibility for the care of individuals in the context of witnessing pastoral. Oh, okay. So they're saying that, like, no, you are still liable because this is happening under the umbrella of Jehovah's Witnesses as a religion. And you guys, as a religion, therefore have responsibility over people in your religious care. Like that's how I'm taking it. Like Watchtower's position is almost so confusing that it's hard to even understand how they
Yeah.
like what they think people are going to say. I don't know. Like of
Yeah, and I
course
think
obviously.
they have to like really point out that these are the times when there are like men taking the lead or whatever. So the elders are often coordinating and making these things happen. So it's like it's not like rogue witnesses like having
Yes.
random secret groups. Like it's literally set up this way. Whether or not they have policies in place, they are set up this way.
Yeah, and they also get into there's a few quotes from people talking about the ministry and not just how it works, but the outsized importance that
Mm.
it has just in your time and how you structure your life. So former elder Shane, what do you say,
Meechin.
Meechin,
Meechin. He's
told the
really cool.
inquiry.
Shout out to Shane.
Oh, okay, you know Shane.
I do. I've
How
met him a
exciting!
couple of times.
That's
New
awesome.
Zealand,
So,
so small.
well, he told the Inquiry, my weekends were consumed doing JW activities. There was no time for playing sports, no spending time with friends, or going to barbecues other than at JW events.
Yeah.
I think that's important because, yeah, you can do that stuff if you're at the congregation picnic
Yeah. You
or
can
you
play
brother so and
basketball
so's.
with the rest of the congregation, young ones. Like but you cannot
Yes.
go and play it for school or whatever.
Oh, Jenny, Watchtower thinks it just fell out of a coconut tree and yet exists within the context of all biblical history. Most current reference that's been made on this show in a long time. My pop culture references are old. Similarly, Cena Doubleman,
Sure.
sure, explained how, as a child, she went out witnessing with Saturdays. She was not allowed to play sports on weekends, as extracurricular activities were frowned upon, and that they were missed opportunities brought on by being a child in the Jehovah's Witness organization. These examples reflect the regular, scheduled, and structured nature of witnessing, and the commitment to it by members, sometimes at the expense of other activities or
Yeah.
hobbies. Yeah, that's really solid, and like, it's true. Like, your parents would be considered bad witness parents if they let you sign up for extracurricular activities. And I just had like one of those brain blasts, like I don't know, like suppressed memories or something that came back. Like, but it had nothing to do with me really. We just had a family in our congregation who were always like, "Oh, they're nice, but they're just like, hey, we need to encourage them to be
Mm.
here more." They let their kids play sports. Like both of their sons, who I went to school with, they were like total studs and they were amazing athletes. They were they were much better served playing sports. Like I'm
Yeah.
glad now that's what they did.
Are you talking
But
about Travis?
we were no, actually. Okay, apparently I had a couple groups of friends like that because Christina just brought up another one. But there was this family like we would see them at the memorial, and they were not viewed as good association by the congregation. So like we treated them as lesser, and
Yeah.
that's like the consequence of trying to have a more normal upbringing is social ostracization to some degree.
Yep. Definitely. Same experience.
Man, now I have to admit I don't know that I personally care that much about missed extracurricular activities. Certainly not sports. I think I missed my opportunity to hang out, just hang out and not be at church.
Yeah.
That I miss. But we're doing it now.
Well, I
Um,
know that like I definitely wanted to pursue art, and like if I was going to go to
yeah,
university, I would have wanted to go for like art related reasons, and I was heavily discouraged from it because first of all, don't go to university, and second of all, why would you go for art? Like, what's
yeah.
that going to do to help?
I didn't know that about you. The same exact thing happened to me. Like I took like my senior year, my junior and senior year, like I took these advanced art classes, and the purpose of them was really to like prepare your portfolio that you would then
Yeah,
submit to art school. But I just never, I just never submitted it because I told my parents, like kind of shamefully, like, well, I mean, if I was gonna go to school for something, it would be art school, and they're like, yeah,
Yeah.
but you can't, so so
Yeah.
that
Yep.
oof.
Yeah.
Laughing so I don't cry. Um, so to cut ahead here a little bit, now they mention also that like informal witnessing is also a thing, and I really like that they say this. Members have the right to decide how much, when, and how they participate in witnessing based on their personal circumstances. Um, the faith provided members testimony that their activity as witnesses is voluntary, blah, blah, blah. But I actually think that kind of works against them because when they mentioned that, I was like, yeah, you can kind of just like go out in service with somebody whenever. And like, if there is an elder who's just on some random Wednesday evening wants to be like, hey, do you want to come on this Bible study with me at 6 p.m.? Like, you'd be like, yeah, sure. I'll throw on my suit or dress or whatever. And so that kind of, the fact that that can just happen in your life means that this religion,
Yeah.
yeah, it's always there,
Always there.
lurking,
Watching.
watching you all the time. I mean, that's literally kind of part of it is God and Satan are always watching you.
Yeah.
Being like, oh, which side are they going to pick? Um, the faith submitted that it did not assume responsibility. It says, and this is the part that's very annoying. It says the only people responsible for the care of those children are their parents, and the decision whether a child should participate in witnessing activities is made by their parents. The faith said there was no system or policy in place whereby the Jehovah's Witness religion gives an elder authority or responsibility to control an individual or family's witnessing activities. This is completely incomprehensible because it's just, well, it's a lie. I mean, I think this is just a lie, right?
It might be up to the parents, but the parents are going to say yes if they are Jehovah's Witnesses who want to
Right.
be good Jehovah's Witnesses. Like,
Yeah, it's up to you. Like, there's a laser, the sniper,
yeah.
with a gun to your head. Like, okay, your choice. You go out in service, or I pull the trigger, and that's
And
that's
like,
the choice.
if elder such and such is pressuring you to take out your son, like, you'll be like, okay,
Yes,
like, here's
and you
lunch.
would be viewed as like sus if you weren't cool with like your kid. You
Yeah.
were like, well, I'm trying to encourage them. I'm trying to get them to reach out and make progress. How dare
Yeah.
you not let me encourage your children after normal meeting hours? Like that's
Yeah.
just part of the environment. And where this really becomes annoying is like my dad was an elder, so no, there was never a sense in my mind that like family and the congregation were separate. Like my dad was an elder, my
Yeah.
like a couple of my grandfathers, just the two that I had were elders, and a bunch of uncles. So for most witnesses, that line between congregation and family is like there
Yeah.
isn't one.
There isn't.
Yeah.
And like they even point out that that witnesses see each other as brother and sister and call each other that. Like, it is, that line is
Yes.
blurred. Like, there is no there is no line.
Yes, 100%. And like this notion that an elder doesn't have the authority or responsibility to control an individual or family's witnessing activities. Well, yeah, like obviously the elders aren't going to like go on service, idiot, and like shove you in the car.
Yeah.
That's not what's happening ever. It's always like, what is the culture? Like, what are you telling your members they have to do in order to gain salvation or whatever?
Yeah.
And that's why Watchtower uses these weasel words of like, would a true Christian do something like this? Ugh. And
Yeah.
the answer is, oh, okay, I guess not. I guess a true Christian wouldn't do something like that.
Not with their
Or,
Bible trained conscience.
right.
Like,
A Christian would use their Bible trained conscience to come to the correct conclusion that all of the not straight sex is bad. And that's just what a good conscience would do. Hypothetically, just throwing that out there in our magazine that we make people study every week. Encourage them to study. Um,
Yeah, to study with their old person best friend.
to study with their old person best friend.
yes.
I'm trying to jump to yes, this here. Taking into account all the available evidence, the inquiry finds that during the inquiry period, the Jehovah's Witnesses assumed the responsibility for children and young people placed in the care of elders other than their parents for witnessing activities. The faith's assumption of responsibility for those children and young people arose through its conferral of authority and trusted status on elders and the routine and regular actions of elders and other adults in taking children and young people into their care, unsupervised for witnessing. Children and young people were therefore within the care of the faith in those circumstances, within the meaning in the terms of reference. The inquiry is not persuaded that the absence of formal or documented policies in support of this practice or the other evidence supplied by the faith alters the reality that the faith assumed responsibility for the care of those children in the situations. Like, I think this is really important because Watchtower does try to get away with their behavior by not putting certain things in writing. Like, as much as they have stuff in writing, much more of the harmful stuff is just purely ingrained in the culture that is sort of like an understood group wisdom.
Yeah.
And I do think it's impressive that they're like, listen, you are saying that this isn't the policy, but this is what's happening. This is the reality of what's happening. Yeah. Boom.
Agreed. I think
Face Norway.
Someone in the comments, Sparky, said that the organization doesn't understand. That's not even my accent. The organization doesn't understand informed consent, and like that's such a big thing.
That's so critical. I heard, I think it was John Dehlin on Mormon Stories talk about this as it relates to just even baptism, and the baptism process of becoming a Mormon. And it's so true of Jehovah's Witnesses. Like, yes, we decided to get baptized, but we did not have informed consent. Like,
yep.
We did not have the information we needed to make that decision, nor, by the way, did we have the capacity to do so, because most of, a lot of times we're children. A lot of times we're children. That was a sentence that made sense. By the way, thank you to Frank Claro for the super chat. I'll get to those a little later. I don't want to detract from the proceedings at all, but appreciate it. Now, there's credible evidence that children and young people... Did I read this? No. Children and young people receiving pastoral care were at times alone in the care of the elders during situations of this nature. Our good friend Shane Meechan described studying with children without their parents being present. I can also attest to doing that. I was asked to study with kids, and that was just seen as normal. Now, to be fair, I was probably 19, and the parents were in the house somewhere, but still,
yeah,
kind of weird that that's a thing I did. At the request of the parents who believed he was the best one to do it. So, the parents had an implicit level of trust in Shane because he was an elder. And he also described pastoral care, including visiting members of the congregation in their homes to assist them or go over encouraging articles from the Watchtower. Oof. When families were considered fatherless, elders were primarily responsible for making sure that women and their children were taken care of. For example, a former elder described how when he was a child in Australia, because he was fatherless, an elder was assigned to go to his house and lead Bible studies. The elder studied with him alone, one-on-one, and without the presence of another adult. Yeah.
Yeah.
And what I think is important about this is, it's not that necessarily is always going to lead to abuse 100% of the time, but, that's not a safe structure. That's not a safe environment.
Yeah.
And they should change it. That's all they're trying to do. I guess, what I would ask any witness watching this is, who actually seems like their priority is taking care of children? Because it simply cannot be Watchtower, right? They are shirking their responsibilities and claiming, no, we don't do anything. We don't separate parents from their kids. What about the main thing you're known for? That everybody, every witness they talk to is of course we separate children from their parents. But, and in fact, I'm trying to find this part where they had witnesses, Jehovah's Witnesses, say stuff.
Yes.
But I can't quite find where that is.
There's something about field service and like
Yeah.
why they were going out field service.
Well, the thing that was said that I thought was so silly was they quote a couple Jehovah's Witnesses at some point, and they're basically like, no, we were generally encouraged to work with our parents and so forth.
Yeah.
And it's like, but you didn't actually leave out the possibility um, of being separated. They're just like, no, that's generally not the case.
And the way they phrased it as well was something about like being trained. Like I would go out with my father and he would train me in field service. Like it was not like a thing that you kind of wanted to do. It was like that you had to be trained to do it. Like, and I was like, that's so creepy. Like the way that they phrased that.
Yeah, I know. That's why I'm annoyed that I can't find that. This is something a good streamer would have, highlighted on something other than his phone earlier. um, Gosh damn it. I thought there was like a section
Yeah.
where they had these quotes, but maybe not. Maybe they're interlaced throughout.
I feel like it was like a section somehow.
I thought so too. I thought there was like a section where they're like Watchtower, statements from them.
Oh yeah, maybe. No.
Yeah, I'm
That's
sure
not it.
this is conclusions on steps by the Jehovah's Witnesses to prevent and respond to the risk of abuse and care. We should read it. Just because I'm here and I need to stop scrolling looking for stuff, this is all really amazing. In response to complaints or concerns about abuse, there would be an internal investigation by elders, and sometimes, if the elders decided there was sufficient evidence, a judicial committee would be formed. The investigation and judicial committee process was rigid, inappropriate, and daunting for victims of abuse, with limited flexibility and very little consideration for the trauma or support needs of the victim, and has likely prevented other disclosures of abuse. The 2,000-year-old two-person rule showed a lack. This is devastating. Showed a lack of understanding of the nature of sexual abuse, and the policy guidance suggesting that the words of adults should be believed over the words of children was misguided and likely caused further harm to children and hello and young people in the faith. Because we're talking about sad things, we're gonna have a quick break where we say hi to Peach, our best puppy friend. Hello, baby. Oh, that's being a good girl.
I just woke her up.
She chilling. Okay, so she just woke up, so she is fully chilled out. Starting to feel her pulse rate go up a little bit, but she seems pretty happy.
She's very content.
She's pretty content. I'm holding her like a little baby. Okay, little baby. I will hand you back to your Masha. This has been a Peach break. And also, sorry that I haven't been checking in with chat so much. So let me do that. We don't have... R. James says, we don't have Sunday schools. We study with them one-on-one. And that's kind of the problem. Like, and you're supposed to have two people on a study, but like sometimes it just doesn't work out like that. Like it's just not feasible. And so I did a lot of Bible studies just like by myself.
Brag.
Yeah. And Forever a Chocoholic says, I hated being separated from my family during a service so much. I had, like, mixed feelings about... I think it always depended on who I was with. But I got car sick a lot. So that was my big issue. Is I felt like I got so nauseous, like, every other week out in service. Because I was stuck with people who were bad at driving. Or they were stuck with my bad digestive system. I don't know. Depending on how you look at it.
I think, the bit that we just read about the 2,000-year-old two-person rule, two-witness rule thingy, they also mentioned somewhere in there that, victims would be more likely to open up to women. Like, I think... Yes, they do. There was something about that, like, whether they were girls or boys.
That's just, like... There's research supporting if that's true.
Yeah. And I was like, oh, but I can't find that anywhere either.
Yeah, I'll try and find that because I know that's in here too. And so they say, in short, the inquiry concludes that the faith's processes for handling and responding to concerns or complaints of abuse were inadequate. Moreover, the faith's approach to this inquiry was premised on the basis that no children or young people were ever in its care. The ongoing failure of the faith to recognize that children and young people were in its care and adapt its approach to child safety gives the inquiry significant concern
Yeah.
about the faith's overall approach to the safety of children and young people in its care. And that's pretty devastating. It's like, they just simply reject the very premise that they have any responsibility. And the way that they have handled this investigation is kind of, it made matters worse.
Yeah.
They probably could have, I don't think ICSA went as hard as it could have at the Jehovah's Witnesses, but the things that ended up really making them look bad was just the fact that the Watchtower reps are terrible. Like, they just make themselves look bad. They're not good at what they do. And they're not prepared to deal with anything that goes against their narrative. Like, the only thing they can do is just, say the company line over and over again, which is insane.
Yeah.
Okay, they talk about this. I think it was in here. Where do they give recommendations? Oh, I think it's in this page. These are the recommendations you sent. So let's talk about these, because... Okay, well, before I do that, thank you, Judith Lyons. It was the old sisters wearing that old school perfume. Like, between just my motion sickness and the, little menagerie of smells that starts forming in a field service car, just, an old guy's Old Spice and old sisters wearing perfume that just kind of smells like powder.
Powdery, yeah.
Yeah, it's a powdery perfume. It's not very confusing. So these are the recommendations that they made, and then I can try and dig through and find these pieces that were missing. But this is important. Recommendation 1: implement the new system. What would you say about a series of words like this?
So that is the Maori term for whatever the new system is, but you would call it Pure Tumu Toru Whanui system. Sorry.
Okay. It is similar to Spanish in terms of...
New Zealand, please.
Okay. So they want them to implement these things as an immediate priority. As an immediate priority, the government and faith-based institutions should implement the 95 holistic redress recommendations in the inquiry's interim report on redress. Maybe I should look at those. Now, this is what you highlighted. Key leaders to make public acknowledgments and apologies. Now, is this something that was for not Jehovah's Witnesses, but for another organization?
So I think that they mentioned a couple of other, they talk about Gloria Vale and the Catholic Church as well. So Gloria Vale is a insulated cult in the South Island. Super cult.
Here, okay. Yes. Yeah. I see. I was getting confused. So, to our earlier point, they mentioned the Pope should make a public apology. Yeah. The Archbishop of Canterbury, the President-elect, not of the United States.
Of the Methodist Church.
Yeah. Moderator of the Presbyterian Church. They mentioned, the Salvation Army. So... the governing body of Jehovah's Witnesses should make a public apology and acknowledgement for the abuse and neglect in the care of Jehovah's Witnesses in New Zealand. Now, this has never happened. They've never made an apology, and that is what they are always encouraged to do, and they don't do it. And in fact, in the Jeffrey Jackson testimony, in the Australian Royal Commission, he basically takes this posture of like, well, I'm sorry if they felt that way. Like, if that happened, we would be sorry.
Yeah.
Absolutely, we would be sorry. But they just never do it. And it's like, yeah, nor is an apology needed. Um,
Wasn't there something recent, like on the website, some talk or something about how like we don't make apologies,
yeah,
like
yeah, exactly. It was it was the governing body. They don't need to make apologies when they change a doctrine. If they
yeah,
realize that they didn't exactly have it right previously, no apology needed. Um, but every other witness like has to have this gnashing of teeth and first make peace
yeah,
with your brother, never go to bed in an angered state kind of like approach to like be constantly apologizing all the time. And
yeah.
in fact, like something that Christina and I both have is like we both apologize way too often. Like we both are just constantly saying sorry.
Same.
And the other person's like, what are you apologizing for? Stop it.
Yeah.
Stop apologizing. And I think so that's true of you too.
Yeah, it's like me and Marsha. We're always going, oh, sorry, sorry,
Yeah.
sorry.
I think like it's I've had people at work call me out on it too, like, stop, why are you saying sorry? You didn't do anything. I'm like, but I was always worried that I was about to be in trouble. And like
Yeah.
this was something my parents like I always was terrified of being in trouble when I was a kid, and my parents just never understood that. Like, why? Why? Do we intimidate you or something? Huh? No,
Yeah.
they didn't say it like that. My dad kind of did. But they're like, the entire religion is based around like you are dirt, you are deserving of death, life is more than any of us deserve, and you need Jehovah's forgiveness and kindness all the time for everything.
Yeah. Undeserved
So
kindness.
yes, what
Right.
a gross term, undeserved kindness. Wait, let me see if there's other stuff. Search for Jehovah. Okay, so that's the only one on this page. Make an apology. Um, Now, it is notable that they say the full extent of abuse in the care of the faith cannot be quantified for reasons including inadequate record keeping and the barriers to disclosure described above. Um, and I think what they mean like by barriers to disclosure is like the group has a natural like they have built a system where people don't want to come forward with abuse, so they don't actually know.
Yeah.
That's how I read that.
Yeah.
Um,
Like you don't realize that it's a barrier. You just think, oh, well, I can't, so I won't.
yeah,
Yeah.
yes, absolutely. Yeah, what were the Jehovah? Unfortunately, has been mentioned many times. Um, Ministry. There's no way it's only said 3 times in this entire document.
What about train?
What? Ah, okay. Is this it?
Yes.
No, no, no. This actually isn't. This is not the quote from
Ah,
Jehovah's Witnesses, though, right? Although this is
I
the
think
one
so.
where.
These are the ones from witnesses,
Oh,
I think.
let's see. The faith provided statements. You're right. You're right. The faith provided statements from current members who had been raised by parents who were Jehovah's Witnesses, testifying that the very common practice of the faith in Aotearoa, New Zealand, is for
Oh,
parents to nailed it, for parents to supervise their own children in witnessing activities. The following are extracts from those statements. Usually Saturday morning, we would meet with a group of others and go preaching for a couple of hours. I was usually with dad and the girls with mom, but we would swap around between mom and dad. So, like, they're not saying that it never happened, but they're like, yeah, we would swap between mom and
usually.
dad. And, like, that's true. That's usually how it would go, except for when it didn't, and I was working with a random creep in the
Yeah.
Kingdom Hall. Um, Most weekends, we would work along with them, brackets their parents, in the door-to-door activity. Most weekends. As we progressed, they would train us to have a part in sharing our faith with others. Yeah, kind of a creepy, meaningless statement. I used to accompany my mom during the week in the preaching activity right from very young and observe how we could help other people to learn about Bible. Oh boy, I think this is one of the people that comments on my channel. Understand it and make application of it in their lives. When I was a little older, my father trained me to go door to door witnessing on Saturday mornings. Honestly, most occasions I would have rather stayed home watching television, and occasionally my father would relent, but more often than not, my brother and I would alternate and accompany him in the ministry. More often than not, which can
And they
apply
would
to more often than
alternate?
not.
Like, did somebody get to stay home and the other one had to go
Yeah.
to service? Like,
I just like that they included this statement because it's an active witness being like, honestly, I didn't really want to go
yeah,
out in service, but
yeah. I think they were like, let's just get like one of the more lax witnesses to put in a comment so that, that's there too. Like, see, you can stay home
yeah, it
and
doesn't
watch
sound
TV.
totally like Stepford brothers and
Yeah.
sisters. We also accompanied our parents and my maternal grandmother in the door-to-door preaching. We were always well supervised during preaching. Those are two
Okay.
separate statements because that's like we were always well supervised.
It's like,
But
okay.
that doesn't mean you were always supervised by your parents. Also, doesn't really help if the parents are the abusers or one of the parents.
And I was
Every
like, why'd they have to say the maternal grandmother? Like, what a,
that
what?
is weird. They're so weird with how they selectively are like, Maria, name has been changed, once went out in service and thought it was nice. And it's like, why did you bother changing that name?
Yeah.
But this
Yeah.
is like the maternal grandmother. It was not my paternal grandmother. Weird. Everything's a little bit weird with them. Um, every Saturday, the four oldest of us children hopped into the family's Volkswagen Combi and we drove all over the countryside, calling on our neighbors to help them learn these precious Bible truths. Dad was training us to be confident in the ministry. That's,
Training
that's very
again?
creepy. Training. This is training. I have many fond memories of my mother training my brother and I in the door-to-door preaching activity, but like, I also have fond memories of being with my mom in the door-to-door field ministry. I have far less fond memories of being with a guy whose real name I almost said, but you get stuck with some weirdos sometimes.
And all I could think of when I was reading this was, first of all, like how many times they mentioned training. That was weird. But then, like,
Yes.
the traveling in a fired up combi, like, that popped into my head from Land Down Under.
Oh, yes.
And
I
was just like,
never, I just thought that was a fun nonsense word. I didn't make the connection.
it's a
Oh my God.
vehicle.
Okay. Well, okay. I'm going to go ahead and say that there's a 0% chance that there will be an apology.
Yeah.
Hasn't been one yet.
Yeah, there hasn't been one yet. And I also don't know by what mechanism they would do it. And like, I think from their perspective, very cynically, they're like, well, if we apologize for one of these things, we're going to be making a lot of apologies.
Yeah.
And really, even if we just say this once, it's going to start a flood of Googling.
And it would, that's exactly what I was going to say. Like, they'd have to acknowledge that this happened and
Yeah.
then, like, have people look it up, which
They
can't
would have to
that.
take responsibility.
Yeah.
And they manifestly refuse. And
Yeah.
one of the things that is kind of bizarre, well, it's just kind of gross about the way that the organization has progressed as these cases have become more prevalent is that the policies just get shifted around in terms of wording, but also the legal blame gets shifted around. Like, it used to be that all appointments of, I think, any elder had to go through the governing body to some degree. Like, and then it got pushed off on the circuit overseer so that they are the person legally accountable. And
Yeah.
elders, are legally liable. I wish Matt Falling Tower was here because he describes this in a video. I can't quite remember what the wording is, but like there are things in the Shepherd book that kind of like it puts the blame on elder. Like they're the fall guys
Yeah.
when things go down. And you kind of saw that in the Royal Commission in Australia. Like if Jeffrey Jackson hadn't happened to have been in town, then it just would have been like those bumbling elders and that circuit overseer who would have just looked like utter jackasses. and the governing body gets off scot-free.
Yep.
They much prefer that.
And I think as well, like, I had no idea, like, I was an active witness at the time, that the Australian Royal Commission was happening. Like, they're gonna throw witnesses off the scent. Like, they're gonna, like, bury it, not let them know that this is happening. And everything's gonna be apostate lies in their literature, and they'll put something in the Watchtower or something to the effect of, like, don't listen to news reports, and, like, some people say that we are abusive in care or something, and then feel like, but we don't actually take care of children.
Yes.
Yeah, like something.
Then why do the governing body, by the way, why are the governing body always making like weird comments like the governing body loves you children and you teenagers? Like, why are they saying that if they're not on some level acknowledging that they are taking responsibility? Like, why do their books start with a letter from the governing body?
Yeah.
These are the questions I have. The Falling Tower, this is incredible, was summoned, and he's like just Beetlejuice, but you only have to say it one time. It's incredible. I was wondering, like, what was it? You made a video about how kind of elders are, I don't know, like legally liable for certain things, like the wording in the Shepherd book. And I couldn't remember the specifics of that. I was talking about that in the context of the way the Watchtower shifts the blame away from the higher-ups and into the people below. That is why you were summoned, sir. I hope you accept the challenge.
I was going to say, I'm so sorry I can't be Matt.
Never apologize for that. You know, I'm glad there's one, but there only needs to be one. I feel the same way about me, by the way. It's a good thing that there's just one, because that would be too much. It's a little too much for me.
I would like to meet another me. Like, if there was me again, I'd be like, well, this is so weird. Like,
oh, yeah.
I
mean, listen.
That for a therapist.
Well, this has been nothing if not a group therapy session. And I'm really glad that you're able to join me. It's really unpleasant going through this stuff.
I thought you were like, I'm glad you're able to join me. It was very unpleasant.
No, you are very pleasant. It's just not... It's not pleasant to go through it alone, you know?
Yeah.
Okay. So a couple of good comments here. This is true. We went over this in a couple of streams ago, if you want to go to the Sunday Service channel. They just put out an announcement of training young unbaptized boys to handle responsibilities at the Kingdom Hall. That is absolutely... It's really crazy. I hadn't even thought about it from that perspective. Do you know what he's talking about?
Yeah. And, like, who's going to be training them exactly?
Yeah.
And when and how? Like, I don't think it's going to be supervised by those children's mothers. Like,
oh, yeah, no, of course not. Absolutely. Like, they, the rule, if people aren't familiar, like, they've had a dearth of men reaching out for privileges. You know, people aren't as invested. Like, they're losing members, and young people aren't as motivated because it's a crusty old religion that makes everything that's fun illegal. And so they're trying to be like, doesn't matter how young they are. If they can walk and hold a microphone, start training them. I'm paraphrasing, but that's kind of the sense I get. Like, sisters basically should be used as a last resort. Like, because of the lack of qualified men, they were having to use sisters, women, to do men's work. And that it was such a crisis in the governing body's mind that they are just encouraging, like, very young children. Like, elders, start training kids.
Yeah.
Be with kids more unsupervised.
It's funny because it's like, I'd get so many comments on my TikToks where I would say, like, women aren't allowed to have these responsibilities in the congregation. And people were like, well, in my congregation, we don't have any brothers, so sisters do microphones. And I'm like, yeah, okay, but that's not normal. Like, that is, you would not, they don't want that. Like, they don't want you to do that.
And like, what do they have to put on their heads when they carry those microphones?
Exactly.
That the brothers don't.
Like, and then now it's like, do you have an 8-year-old boy in your congregation, choose him,
Yeah.
not that like 32-year-old woman over there that knows stuff.
Yeah. Not this like mature woman who's dedicated her life to the organization and is willing to like go to jail for the truth. Just this snot-nosed kid. Who cares? It'll keep him off his iPad and maybe he'll become one of us. I think they must have a real worry about not having enough dudes.
Yeah. And I think,
Not
yeah,
enough
when I was
bros.
in, like, it was a huge thing, like, especially among single sisters, being like, oh, there's like double the amount of sisters than there are brothers. Like, you'll never find anyone to get married. So it was like extra competitive.
That I don't know if it is in the movie What is True Love that Jehovah's Witnesses made, but my family was involved with like when they used to do stage productions of the dramas. We did a stage production of What is True Love. You know,
Lovely.
they based the movie probably on our thing that we did. But they in the stage version of it, that was a line because if you remember the story is like a good Jehovah's Witness said like marrying a good Jehovah's Witness and kind of a fringy Jehovah's Witness marrying a
Yeah.
fringy Jehovah's Witness. And so the kind of bad girl witness is like, well, you gotta take what you can get because there's more women than men in this organization. So you gotta take, you gotta find and hang on to what the first random sweaty dude who comes your way. And
Which is
that's like
how
a,
they deal
yeah,
with microphones, too.
yes, perfect approach. It makes total sense. Um, Gotcha. Yeah. Okay. So the CEO takes the legal hit now for that. Oh, now, but you brought up something that is also a change, which is now guys in their mid 20s can be COs. It was like a huge deal if somebody in their 20s became an elder when
Yeah.
I was a kid. And then suddenly it became a little bit more common. But now they're like, if you are like 24, 25, you can be a circuit overseer. And I'm just trying to imagine me at age 25 being essentially like I don't know, like an ambassador to like a bunch of congregations. Like, well, there's really no worldly equivalent to it. Regional manager,
Regional man, yeah.
assistant to the regional manager, like that's exactly what it would be. But like, I was guys in their mid 20s are the least trustworthy people in the world.
Dude, like, because I used to do the carts, like, with the literature and stuff, the metropolitan witnessing. The guy that was in charge of the scheduling was in his mid 20s, and he was scheduling him and his bros to be with the specific single sisters. Like,
Genius.
like they're not going to be able to like look after the congregation because they're going to be looking after their own needs first.
That is such a good call. I guarantee you that will happen. Um,
But maybe in 10 years' time, they'll be looking for just any young child to be the CEO. And I kind of want to see that happen.
that's why I always assert that I think that the governing body really believe their own bullshit. Like they really have huffed their own farts on this stuff because like this is not the kind of decision you would make if you were building a group for longevity's sake. This is the kind of thing you do if it's like, well, we just got to stick it out a couple more years, probably at most. Like, and all the building projects we have now, those are going to be so much easier in paradise. Like, they're always just doing just enough to make it just to the next court case, to the next time they have
Yeah.
to deal with this. Because I think they really do think that Armageddon is coming, at least
Yeah.
on some level. Um, but I think we have thoroughly analyzed this document. It
Yeah.
was it was really enjoyable to go through it. And shout out to everybody who gave testimony in this document. Everyone did an amazing job. Like they articulated everything so thoroughly. They captured the culture of Jehovah's Witnesses in a way that can be really hard to do.
Yeah, I think Shane's been working a lot behind the scenes on this and a few other things. So big shout out to him and all of the other survivors and people that have put their experiences in for this because it's made a huge difference. And like even just for us as other ex cult members, to read it, and just for someone to see it and be like, hey, I wasn't alone. This is my exact experience. Like, it's really
Yes.
helpful even just from that.
It is. It is. And like this, I think that it was, on some level, I'm sure it was annoying to have to deal with Watchtower's lack of transparency, like their refusal to play ball. And I don't know what their perception of the commission itself is, like XJW activists in the area. But like this is quite a good report in terms of
Yeah.
like a really good document that outlines Watchtower's abuses in a really clear, comprehensive way. That's like dispassionate. It has really good quotes from people that who used
And
to be members.
it's
Yeah.
just not letting Watchtower off the hook, which I really love. Like, they're really
Yes.
highlighting that they failed and they continue to fail to protect
Yes.
children.
Yeah. Being called an
Yeah.
ongoing failure.
Burn.
I'd be sad if someone said that about me.
Look, I can say it about myself, but
Yeah.
for the entire government of a country to say it about me, no, that's
That would be
ouch.
tough. If like tomorrow they're like, okay, here we had a special Senate committee look into Jake, and it turns out that he's a persistent failure. Wow, I can't believe they did that. So thank you so much for joining me, Mickey. Where can people find you on the internet?
Thank you. I'm on Instagram mostly in my stories at the moment. Instagram, TikTok, and anywhere else that there might be a platform. I'm Apostate Barbie.
Amazing.
Yeah.
It's easy to remember. Good follow. Was dropping truths, hard facts. I couldn't think of a cool thing to say. I don't know. Your videos are good.
I should probably do some more soon because I've been through a bit of a drought. So, yeah.
Who are you telling? I've been thinking the same thing about this channel. Well, thanks everybody who joined us on a Wednesday night. We had a good crowd, and yeah, definitely like this is a document that like you could absolutely send your JW friend or family, and like, what are they going to say? Like, if they actually read this, what are they going to say?
Yeah.
Don't read it. I don't know. I just think, yeah, I'm glad that this exists. All right. Well, thanks everybody.
Thanks for having me.
Follow Apostate Barbecue coming soon. And goodbye.